Hello everyone, this is Genius Yoshi, and today is a very exciting day in the world of TCGs because the rules of Lorcana have just been revealed. I'm very excited about this upcoming trading card game, and I hope to make quite a few videos on the topic. So now, the first one I'm going to make is going over that rule set and drawing parallel to what we know about Magic the Gathering, and applying these concepts to Lorcana. So let's dive right in. Let's get things started by looking at what a card looks like. Here we have Mickey Mouse, the Wayward Sorcerer, and there's a lot of things happening on this card. So let's start at the top left. Inside the little hexagon here, there's a 4, and that 4 is the ink cost required to play that card. The ink cost is essentially the converted mana cost necessary to play this card. The little circle around the hexagon here is the inkwell icon. It means that you're allowed to play this card as part of your inkwell, or essentially just play it as a land, which you'll then be able to tap for ink in order to play more cards. Over here you have the name of the card, which you didn't need me to tell you about, so I will stop hovering over it and move on. There's classification, which is kind of typing of the card, Reborn Sorcerer. The ink is actually written here, although the coloring of the card should give it away, but just in case, there's a little icon here to cement this. Then there's effects and abilities, which will vary a lot from card to card. There's the ink key, which just tells us that there are 6 different ink types in play, as opposed to Magic's 5 colors in the color pie. In terms of these icons, well, there's strength, willpower, and lore value. Strength is essentially power, and willpower is the equivalent of toughness. If your character takes more damage than its willpower, then the character is going to get banished. As opposed to Magic, though, damage sticks and doesn't get removed at the end of turn, so we need damage counters here, kind of closer to the Pokemon trading card game. And then we have lore value, and the lore value is kind of a third primary stats of the card. And it's whenever you send your character on quest, you're going to gain this much lore. So remember how I mentioned that there is this little circle thing at the top left of the card, meaning that we have the inkwell symbol. Well, this is how you play cards. You will start with a hand of 7 cards, and from these 7 cards you're allowed to play 1 card that has the inkwell symbol inside your inkwell, and from this point on in the game you get to actually tap or exert 1 ink every turn in order to generate 1 ink that you can use to pay for your card's effect. So it's essentially playing the card as a land, which you can then tap once a turn, and then in the untap step at the beginning of the turn you get that mana back. And also the starting phases are very similar to Magic the Gathering. It's basically untap, upkeep, draw. In case of Lorcana, you unexert all your cards, then you activate any effects that happen before the draw step, and then you draw the card. So it follows the same flow. Then we have different types of cards. So we have character cards, we have item cards, and we have action cards. At least those are the types of cards that have been spoiled so far. Characters are like creatures. You play them and they remain into play until they get banished. Items are like artifacts. You actually can use their abilities on the turn that you play them, and they're just items. They remain there and they're not characters. Then you have actions, and actions are essentially sorcery spells. You play them, they go to your discard pile, you get the action, and you move on with the rest of your turn. The next step is, what do we do with these characters and how do we win the game? Well, one of the things that you can do with a character is send him on a quest, and that is called questing. And to quest one of your characters, you need to exert them. So you tap your character, and then you gain lore value equals the number of lore symbol on the character. And there is the summoning sickness rule, where you can't quest on a character with a character on the turn that it's played. You also can't attack with a character on the turn that it's played. And the goal of the game is to actually be the first player to reach 20 or more lore. And there are different cards that will give you lore, but mostly it's going to be done through questing. So this questing part of the game is actually the core part of the game. It's not the combat system, it's sending characters on quests. And this brings us to challenging. Challenging is the combat system, and it doesn't actually help you win the game. You can't attack your opponent or do anything like that. You can't block. You actually choose what you are attacking. And when you're attacking a character, you inflict combat damage equals to your attack power, and your opponent takes that much damage, and your opponent strikes back. So like in Magic, when you attack them, they attack you. And damage is dealt both ways. But the one interesting thing is that you cannot challenge a ready character. You can only attack tapped characters. And that is very interesting because it means that as long as I don't tap my character, either to challenge you or to go questing, you can only remove it via some kind of removal spell. And that is where a lot of the complexity of this game is going to come from. And finally, some other rules that I've glanced over some of those throughout the presentation, but I want to reiterate them. So characters have summoning sickness. When you play a character, the ink must take a turn until the end of turn to dry, so you can't actually exert that character, whether to go questing or to challenge another character during the same turn. At the start of the game, you get a free partial mulligan on your opening hand. So you get to draw your 7 cards, pick out how many cards you want to send to the bottom of your deck, replace them with some fresh new cards, then you shuffle your deck. If you must draw your deck and your deck is empty, you lose the game. Another potential winning condition, depending on the cards that get spoiled, and we'll see if mill becomes a viable strategy, or strategy at all. In terms of deck building, you're limited to 2 inks per deck, and you need at least 60 cards in your deck with a maximum of 4 copies of an individual card. Note that you're allowed to have as many Mickeys as you want, as long as you only have 4 of each specific Mickey card. And that's it for the rules. I hope that this tutorial is very useful to you and that you've enjoyed the Lorcana rules and are as eager as I am to start playing the game once it gets released. If you're interested in learning more about Lorcana and exploring all of its possibilities, please subscribe to my channel, as I'll be covering a lot more Lorcana stuff in the future, including deck building tips, some deck lists, and gameplay videos. Especially once the cards are out, I plan on showing off a bunch of different strategies with the physical cards. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.